should be live, I think. Yeah. All right, testing. I'm live. And it's 720p. Okay, it's better than nothing. The sound 720p. Okay, it's better than nothing. All right, it's working, so that's good. Okay, let's see. Trying to put the sound volume. Hopefully it's okay. Okay, we have game 3 of the Steinitz match, so let's continue the series. I know people maybe don't want to hear it, but you know, I think it's very interesting, so I'm doing it for the love of the game, and you also have to know your classics, okay? It's also for my YouTube channel. So, the third game, we see Spanish, and we see the famous legendary Steinitz defense with d6. Okay, this is his invention in this game. The idea is that after d4, he plays bishop d7, safeguards versus the pin, indirectly protects the pawn, and this is pretty standard since his time. This defense crossover into modern chess as well. I play this bishop d7, d6 with the g6, knight f6 setup. So bishop d7 is pretty good. So Chigorin takes on e5, and the idea is that if black takes with the knight, white can play this, and you cannot take the bishop because of this double attack. And if you take the knight, then there's check, and white recaptures the bishop and keeps extra pawn and completely ruined position for black. Likewise, if black takes the knight, white has this very important move, queen d5, double attack on these pawns, and black has to lose the pawn, because if you play knight f6, you can either take immediately or take even this pawn. Or if c6, same thing, take on e5. With the check, the bishop returns, and white has very healthy extra pawn, which is almost a decisive advantage. So black has to recapture with the pawn, which he did. And now we have normal game starting, castles, white finishing the developments, and black is actually faced, you have a difficult decision to make. You will play your friend in the last round of the tournament. He is on 4.5, and you're on 4 and 5. If we draw, he wins the tournament, where we both go home with good results. I wonder if I should try to beat my friend. We're close to the same rating and strength. We play in a couple of hours. Well, you have to talk about it with your friend and how you both will feel about this. I mean, obviously, there is such a thing in chess as you're playing your friends, and for me, it's extremely difficult to play friends. I mean, I don't like say things like, you know, we should just make a draw and go home, yeah? But, you know, sometimes what I can say is that, you know, in the tradition of the old champions, in tradition of the world champions in chess was, if you're leading with the score before the last round of the match, and you can say a thing like, I am agreeing to draw at any moment, okay? And that was actually considered a gentlemanly approach. So what I can say sometimes is that I am okay with the draw in this game, okay? It doesn't mean that you are fixing the result. You're basically notifying your opponent about your intentions, that you're okay with the draw and you're not going to play for a win. unless, you know, he is playing for a win, right? So that's one of the ways you can avoid the fixing, all right? The second thing you can do is just play the game, and then you both learn. Yes, it will be painful if somebody loses, but, you know, again, you should talk about such things in general, especially with your friend, yeah, because sometimes it's actually very important to fix good tournament result, okay? Because imagine you spend decades, you know, working towards your grandmaster title. You spent enormous amount of money, right? And then everything comes to this last round game, and then of course there is a question, and you play your friend, imagine, right? So and then there is a question, are you willing to risk everything against the guy, especially who knows all your weaknesses, yeah? And you're willing to, you know, I can't even say it's like a grandmaster game, like any important result, right? And yeah, I mean, things like this like happen all the time, okay? And but what people do, they talk about it, okay? They talk about it, or they don't talk about it. But if you don't talk about it, then there will be some potential mutual misunderstanding, or there is some you know, aversion or some negative feelings. And you know, after all, we have to remember that chess is also like a game, yeah. And for some people, personal relationships are way more important than anything else in life, okay? And if you talk with your friend and you both agree that it's not worth fighting this, and it's important to fix the tournament result, yes, okay, maybe people will not be happy, but you know, you played the rest of the games, you deserve your result, and you know, at the end it's your decision, okay? That's what I think. Good evening, Mr. Rolandson. Yeah, so I would say just, you know, talk to your friend first, okay? Make sure you talk to him, because if you don't talk to him, you know, then you might actually run into problems, yeah. Yeah, there are some people, because he might always reply, I don't want to talk about it. You know, he is a man of principle, then he doesn't want to talk about it. That's okay, but you know, then you're clear, all right? Then you're clear, then you just go and play and do your best to crush your friend. That's pretty much it. All right, but then again, it all depends on what you feel, because some people are extremely principled. They like say, no, this is cheating and this is fixing, etc., 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 etc. You know what fixing is? Fixing is if you're gonna lose the game and your friend is gonna win huge money prize. That's fixing, okay? But you know, the draw result, you know, it is not fixing, in my opinion, okay? And it happens all the time in all levels of chess. All right, so if we're gonna talk about things like, you know, it's wrong, thousands and probably millions of chess players been doing this, so that means, you know, there is a gentlemanly exception to this rule, okay? All rules have an exception. And I think that, you know, agreeing on the draw, you know, just to make sure that the result is good, is fine. As long as you do it within the rules of the game, right? Threefold repetition, etc., etc. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even arbiters, like, they look at the grandmasters doing this, they just go smile and say, okay, and accept the result, because, you know, some things are very practical in nature. You can't eliminate human nature. I mean, otherwise, you know, imagine even people who've done horrible crimes, but because of some circumstances, you know, they have things like plea deal, right? Why? Because there are higher concerns, okay? And this is a chess game. All right, so having talked about that, yeah. So again, talk to your friend, think about it. If you're both okay with a draw, then you know, just go make a draw and fix the result. And for both of you, what can I say? As long as you don't lose on purpose, I think it's okay. I mean, it's the problem of the system, okay? It's not your problem. I think that's why they came up with the knockout system. In the knockout system, you can't make a draw. There is always a tiebreak, and there is always a winner, okay? But if the tournament allows the draws to happen, and they happen all the time, then, you know, you're within rights. All right, let's continue. So bishop d6 is, Steinitz likes to put bishop like this. He protects both pawns, also stops this file, yeah? But he's playing according to his own way of chess. And he likes, you know, to overprotect stuff, yeah? Even if it's a little bit passive. In general, these days, you know, people play a little bit more active, like bishop here, knight e7, knight g6, and then bishop goes to c5. So these days, it is known that the bishop should be on c5, okay? But bishop d6, or knight f6 first. Yeah, bishop d6 is a little bit announcing, like, I am gonna be just super defensive, solid person, yeah? And then the problem with this bishop is that he can be hit either with a knight, or when white puts the bishop here, a really good position, then c4, c5 can come. But okay, it's not such a terrible move, so it's fine. So knight c3 is a little bit incorrect. Again, knight should be like gunning for the square to remove this bishop, and also hit the pawn. Here the knight is developed, okay? It's developed, yes. It's out of the way, it's in the center somewhere. Potentially there's some squares protecting the pawn, but it's not the best square for the knight. That's the problem, okay? Generally, your pieces should be serving some function. And they should have a potential, all right? Because later in the game, you'll have to move this knight somewhere. Well, there is small potential if the bishop like goes here, queen here, rook d1, and then knight goes to d5, and then c4, c5. Actually, it's not that bad, okay? But knight d2 should be checked, verified. So knight e7, not bad. This actually move counts against knight f6 because then you play bishop g5, and then it justifies this move, yeah? Of course, black can always play this. And now knight d5, you can respond with g5. Or you can play even g5 immediately. But in those days, you know, this would be considered pretty obnoxious, yeah? Because you're ruining your pawn structure, giving the squares. Steinitz not the kind of the guy who would willingly play like this. But it's a modern vision where the locking this bishop out of the game temporarily at the cost of this pawn structure is worth it. All right, but he plays knight e7. So that bishop g5 loses all danger because of f6, and Chigorin still plays it, and I think it's incorrect because f6 is actually good for black. But again, small inaccuracies. f6. Castles first, and black is more or less developed, and we got a very interesting position actually, because where are pieces going? For black it's pretty obvious, yeah. Knight goes to g6, maybe this knight to e7 or bishop to g4 starts pinning. f5 is not looking really good because then you get a pawn island. So maybe queen e8, yeah, queen e8, put the rook here. Sometimes knight can even go to b6 or to d6. So this bishop is key to black position. So white has to do something about it. So that's why he gives a check, first line, and knight b5. And we are getting the bishop. Good. So knight c8, pretty much the only move. I mean, you can play bishop e8, but then you really screw up this coordination among the rooks. I mean, it is playable. And the idea is if you take, black takes, and now black is actually fine, because this d5 potential is coming. This knight is too far from the square. And we get sort of knight of position with the bishop on f7, and black potentially gets d5 in. or even f5 and then d5. Yeah, so it is playable, but knight c8 is most logical move, because if you take on d6, obviously knight takes, hitting the bishop and the pawn, and black gets immediately back the bishop because of this, and you can play even this move. I mean, there is obviously f5 as well, with the idea of, you know, fork, and it's actually maybe better. Yeah, but if white plays bishop d5, then definitely knight goes here, and if black ever gets this bishop, black is just better slightly. Okay, knight is better than this knight, this bishop is a little bit better than this bishop, and white needs really to keep the Spanish bishop alive if he hopes for any kind of advantage. So queen d2, logical. He wants to put the rooks here, but unfortunately it's not exactly the best move. What is the best move is a good question. a4. The idea is if you play a6, there is tactics, which is this move, which I'm pretty sure they didn't see. I didn't see it either, because if you take the bishop, take the rook, and you take the bishop, and white is winning, yeah? So, and then you have this extremely unpleasant pin. Black is still okay if he plays this, and if you take on d6, again, the position is fine for black because of the spin. White has to play this pretty much, and then bishop e6, and c4, a5. Black has this technical weakness, but in reality it's white pawns that are weak. The knight will remaneuver here to attack these two pawns. Potentially there is f5, and the difference in the bishops favors black. Okay, so this is a good position for black. All right, so Chigorin plays queen d2, connects the rooks. The rook comes here. Queen e8 is fine, creating potential tactical threat, but there was nothing wrong with chasing the bishop immediately, because as we mentioned, this is good for black. Also, you don't have bishop c5 anymore, bishop is hanging, and black is simply fine. So, and if you move the knight, then black is a little bit better, because white just wasted the whole tempo. And after knight e7, black piece is actually really compact, and better than white's ragtag team of pieces here. All right, so queen e8, not bad. Rook here, bishop g4, of course, immediately. Bishop has to return, and now we have a situation here, like, yeah, the game is approximately equal, but Steinitz plays knight d8. It's kind of interesting that he really doesn't want to play this move. Yeah, it's kind of hard to understand, because if you take the bishop, then this pawn is hard to defend now, yeah, because queen d3 runs into f5 thanks to this fork. So it's a lot of problems. It's already like huge advantage for black. So he cannot take on d6, which means he must go here, and then you can play this, and you know, play knight d6 and take this knight anyway. So this is actually a little bit better for black. And after the trades, and now you can play knight d8. So this knight goes to e6, covers the square. The second knight goes to d6, and white has really messed up pawn structure, and has to look for ways to, you know, try to draw this game. So Steinitz not playing a6 seems a little bit strange, but you know, he has a general idea which is correct. The knight should be on e6. The general idea is correct. The knight goes here, protects this, gets control of these squares, and let's see what happens. White plays c4, and black probably misses some tactic. Yeah, again, a6 should have been played, because knight also hits this guy. So in the game, knight e6 is played, and h3, but white misses c5. Yeah, that's the thing that both players probably missed, because you cannot take on c5, knight to bishop, you just lose the rook. And after c5, bishop has to go. Yeah, because if you take on f3, Yeah, you can take with the pawn. King goes to g1. There is no mate. Rook is here. Bishop e7, and the invasion is the thing that poses black, you know, the problems which he probably cannot resolve. Okay, because this is hanging. Bishop probably must go here, and then you hit this defender, and this pawn is probably gonna go anyway. Yeah, there is some defense like this. Take. If you take here, then trap. So take, and take here. But again, rook on the 7th with an absolutely horrible knight. And this bishop is stuck protecting this pawn. So this looks like absolutely winning for white, because black is completely paralyzed. Yeah. So the thing is, he thought that, you know, Chigorin played h3 first. Okay, he thought that black cannot take on f3. In those days, it was considered that, you know, it's unfathomable that you would trade your bishop for knight, you know, and give your opponent a very strong bishop pair in what seems to be an open position. And white does have an advantage here, that's true. But black is not losing immediately here, at least. Yeah, queen c2 and rook d8. Yeah, so he's not losing immediately. White does have an advantage. But Steinitz plays bishop h5, and finally Chigorin hits on this move, queen e7, and he plays here queen d5, double attack on the knight and the pawn. So the question is why he didn't play queen d7, and the answer is because that's the point of bishop here. Black can play this move. Okay, and if you move, then black is actually better because he wins this pawn. Okay, so that bishop is very tricky. The only thing is, maybe you can take this pawn, and then you have to calculate this line, like what this is. So bishop c5, you must take the pawn, and the big danger is this knight. Yeah, knight moves, and he has no squares, because if you take, this pawn is hanging. Yeah, you can save your knight, but you're gonna lose the pawn. Like this, and knight e4. Even rook c8 first, yeah. So extra pawn for black with excellent chances to win this game. Alright, so queen d7 is wrong, and Chigorin plays queen d5. The other move to play would be bishop c4. The idea again to eliminate this defender of this pawn. And then the question becomes, what is this position? Take, and now queen d5. The idea is if c6, you play queen d7, and you hit this guy, and again, black pieces are absolutely horribly placed. So that was another consideration. But he plays queen d5, which I think is fine. Okay. Andromeda. All right. So, and what does Steinitz do? He is worse, yeah? He is worse. He has to do something. He plays queen c6. Yeah, this must have been really hard for him, because after this move, he really messes up his pawn chain, and white takes on c6. And he probably actually counted on this move, yeah? He thought that the white takes the queen, and obviously black is okay. But still intermezzo. Still problems for black. Because if you take here, knight c7 or b8, there is the fork, yeah, and black loses. Yeah, so even this would not have resolved his problems. But let's see what Chigorin does. He plays bishop c4, first line, and yeah, this knight is removed. Yeah, so bishop e8, trick. If you take, there's bishop b5, and black is only slightly worse. So, and Chigorin plays a4, and this is inaccurate. A little bit inaccurate. It is third line, but b4 is a little bit better. Just to protect this pawn first. And then you take this thing. Yeah. Okay, a4 makes sense actually to me. I don't see like how bad it is, because Steinitz plays knight c5, not the best move. He had to play a6, force this knight off. Take, and take on b5. And this is a very interesting position. White has only one move here to keep his advantage. If you take this pawn, there is no advantage because this knight comes to a7 and gets very nice squares. Black's fine. The only way for white to play for an advantage is to find this move and hit this bishop, because this bishop has nowhere to go. Yeah, everything is hit. The threat is bishop c8 and knight e7. And you cannot play g6 because of this, and you lose the exchange. Which is probably the best line for black, yeah. The other line you can play is play this, and bishop d8. And the only problem here is that c6 will be kind of annoying. The threat is bishop c5. So, you must play this, and then take. And here, several moves. Yeah, black bishop's absolutely horrible. Bishop d5, or you can even play this and maintain the threat of bishop b4. And apparently black is much worse here. Okay, so that was the best play for black. Instead he took on c5, took on c5, took on c6, and you guys can see this rook attack and the standard fork treatment, yeah? So he plays knight d6, which is correct. And this is not correct. Yeah, he must grab this rook, of course. And he had to define this move, which is not easy. This is the only move that sort of gives white advantage. Otherwise, you know, pair of bishops and a lot of pawns are hanging. So, yeah. I'm not sure why he didn't play this. I'm pretty sure Chigorin actually saw this. I'm pretty sure he saw this. Maybe he wasn't sure that this is a winning endgame. It does look a little bit murky, especially with both pawns hanging here. But in general, this should be played anyway because of this extremely strong threat to trade pair of rooks and then keep this pawn alive. If you keep this pawn alive, trade pair of rooks, then this pawn potentially king comes. You take the rook and take this pawn and win the knight. Okay, that's just a sort of a general principle. So the only thing black can do is play this maybe. And then you have to play this, yeah. Don't give the pawn. And it's kind of a pretty large advantage, but still a lot of fighting left. But instead he decided to keep the bishop alive, and Steinitz makes a mistake here, yeah. So the big question is what's gonna happen after this, and the answer is that this position is not so easy for white to win because black piece is extremely strong, especially this bishop, and there is an additional if black managed to play a5 b6, you know, cement this bishop on c5. This pawn structure is extremely strong. Again, pair of bishops very strong, take away all the squares, hitting a lot of things. Black is actually not worse here, okay? Even if he worse, it's not by much. So bishop d5 seems like the only logical line, and the problem is this move. Because if you play here, he has a tempo. He got the knight away from the attack, and now this rook is hanging. So rook a1, and that's bishop b5. Grab the pawn, and there is check. And black takes this pawn. He is actually better. Yeah. So this was actually the way for black to play. Instead, black decides to give up an exchange in the worst scenario, and he actually gives up the bishop. This is a bad idea. Black needs the bishop pair. So he had to take and move the bishop here somewhere, for example, and try to cement this bishop. Yeah, I mean, he's probably already lost here anyway, because once this knight is exchanged, The pawn is gonna go, and the rook's coming, yeah? So it's probably a lost position at this point anyway. Okay, so he takes on f3, takes, and so he wants to set up this fortress. Let's see if that happens, if he succeeds with this fortress. I really doubt it. Rook d8. Okay, and this is small mistake. a5, potentially you need the pawn here. Why? Because this is only 2 squares away from winning, and your king either comes here. It's very difficult to protect this pawn. If black plays a5, he can easily protect this pawn. But if you put the pawn on a6, he can't protect this pawn without, losing this bishop's credibility. So he has to play bishop d4, then you play f4 and double your pawns, and then another f4. Okay, but king g2 is okay. a5 and bishop c2, and after this move, black is actually managing to set up sort of fortress. The only way for white to play was to play this move and utilize the fact that black cannot play g5 because he is going to lose this pawn. And then, white probably slowly wins this, as the pair of rooks with this bishop will create very strong threats to this king. Yeah, this is very technical, and of course Chigorin, he would rather prefer dynamic positions to play, and Steinitz kind of like sort of technical positions, I would say. He was fine in tactics also, but bishop c2, okay, g6, first line, h4. This is the correct approach. You need to get rid of this weakness, h-pawn, and trade something, yeah? So the thing is, g6 should have been played or not, yeah? But you have to close this bishop, so you gotta play this. h4. And black missed actually a rook c8 possibility. I don't think it's really that big, to be honest. Bishop can go back to b1, and you still have to go back because you can't allow the rook on the 7. Alright, so rook c8 was a very tricky thing. The reason it is tricky because if you take, you think your opponent blunders, but there is bishop hanging at the end. Okay, so king g7 is fine. King g7 is fine. f4 looks good. Take. King comes. Now he had to play rook c8. The reason he had to play this is because this knight can finally move. Because if rook d7 does not keep the king on the 8th, right? King can come to h6 now. So that's the interesting part. For example, if bishop comes here, black plays knight f5. And he's actually fine. Okay. If you play bishop b1, there is knight c4. And knight can jump here. Also, this pawn is hanging. So black is actually okay. After this move, white has very limited amount of things he can do. Bishop d3 is probably the best move to prevent all these knight moves. And then rook c7, because if knight f7, rook d7, king f8, and rook here. And this is probably win. So rook c7 probably is a good idea to try to keep an eye on this 7th rank. And king here first before you play knight f7. Otherwise bishop moves and then rook d7. And it looks like white is still posing a lot of problems for black, yeah? This. Take. Yeah, definitely not easy to win this. Definitely not easy, especially with the opposite color bishops. So a lot of play here, that's for sure. But Steinitz plays f5, and he thinks he can come with the king, protect the knights, and then the rook is freed, and close the bishop. Sounds actually very logical, yeah? So let's see if that worked. King f6. And again, he misses this trick to get out of the spin. The spin is critical thing. Rook c8, rook c6, and then king f6, and black does have a chance. Bishop b3, and now after this move, rook no longer can remove the pin, and black is paralyzed because king e6 is not happening. And rook e5, rook e6 idea is also huge. Okay, thanks to this pawn move, now rook can jump to e6 and then to e7. And with the king here, h5, rook h1, potentially it's actually a mating net. So he plays h6, h5 looks correct. The idea is if g5 check, it's just one check. And this pawn looked good, but black is paralyzed. And rook t7, now you can return here. You can play this first. And then bishop comes here. The threat is to take this pawn based on the spin. And if black plays f4, then again, rook here, potentially rook here, rook to e6, king to g4. Black is like completely paralyzed, yeah? But okay, let's see. How do you win this precisely? Okay, as I mentioned this, and then like bishop b4, rook e2, yeah, and rook is coming to e6. You can't move the rook. Check, wins the knight. Rook comes here anyway. And thanks to this alive pawn, now this pawn is gone, okay? Boom. The threat of the discovered check forces black to lose this pawn, and with it the game. So that's why he took an h5. And yeah, bishop c2 is fine, but rook e5, rook e6, again, rook here, as we saw, is a disaster for black. But rook bishop c2 is fine. So he gives up this pawn, and the idea is if you take some pinning hopes to stay alive, but not as many. Very nice check, by the way. Like verifying if black plays king d7, then you can play f3 first, and then you take on f5 probably, yeah? Or the rook moves here. And rook e6. And you take all the pawns, and it's clear exchange, and f5 is gone. Winning stuff, yeah? Alright, so king f8. Rook f5. Okay, why not? Check. f3. Black is allowed to check, but king is moving and the pawn is hanging. So he plays this. King g4 is fine. Rook g2. And let's see where the bishop goes. And bishop goes to f5, but the best square is on d3, b5, and then creating mating threat. But bishop f5 is fine. And probably he plays this. And this is not correct, actually. Wow, in one move, white's advantage goes from decisive to almost draw because he missed this check. Check, and black takes, hitting the bishop and the pawn. And he takes this critical pawn because now white is left with the pawns on the same wing, which is very hard to win. So you needed this pawn to, to push it and to promote and to win the game. Now it's very difficult to win this. So let's see, king g2, rook f4, bishop e6. This is fascinating, actually. This is extremely unusual material balance. Okay, yeah, okay, it is winning because king is forced into the 7th. Yeah, if the king was somewhere like here on b4, it's probably a draw, actually. But the king is on this line, and white is blundering again. My god. Wow, Steinitz actually sees all these tactics. It's crazy. Crazy. And this is actually draw. This is now the draw game. But he needs to see rook g4 check. King f3, and only now h5. And the threat is knight d4 check, and it's a draw game. Wow. He plays h5 first, which is also okay. Check. 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 And This is wrong check. Wrong check. He need to keep this check for this knight if the king comes here. So rook f4 check was correct. King cannot cross over. He must play this. And then knight d4. Check. And rook g4. And suddenly white king is actually in a mating net. Okay. So this forces white rook to come here. And then black can take this pawn. And this is a draw. All right. So see what happened? White played like really well the whole game. It's already moved 54. The guy is probably tired, but amazing defense by Steinitz. And let's see what he missed. And he gave this extra check, and after that, white's position is close to winning again because black is very likely to lose this pawn. Bishop e7, check. Rook c4, very nice, but still, yeah, he should have taken this rook and gone for this endgame. Very good chances to draw this. Very good chances to draw this. He plays rook f8. Suddenly, again, this resurfacing. And white needs to get this rook into the game. If he does, then he's winning. Yeah? King c8, rook d7. Okay, critical mistake. Bishop should be somewhere here. But in order to do that, you need to see like how to play here. Bishop g5 is a problem because of this move, and there is also another check coming. And if king d8, then there is rook b7, and the pawn is hanging. Yeah. So, which is why black needs to find this move first to take away the square from the rook. Bishop is indirectly protected. And now you can play bishop g5, but it's still lost actually. Yeah, yeah, because king is like really badly placed, and the rook is coming out, and knight is actually very far from protecting the king. So this is winning for white. Yeah, yeah. So black could have taken this rook and probably made a draw. Instead, he keeps pieces active for white. Again, another possibility to trade one pair of rooks. Bishop c4. Okay, finally, white trades, but this is a different trade, yeah. And white is now winning, yeah, because he managed to do everything. Cut off black king, bishop protects everything, rooks on the 7th, and bishop on d8 is very sad bishop. Yeah. Yeah, black protects everything, but this time, you know, this Steinitz idea of protecting everything kind of boomeranged him, yeah? Because bishop on d8 is absolutely horrible. But how do you win this? Yeah, so the good question is, how do you win this? And Chigorin sees that if he puts the bishop here, he has the possibility to play rook a7, rook a mate, yeah? Okay, pretty reasonable actually. Knight g5 threat. King g4 first. Black protects against the mating threat, but now he's dead lost. So what was the mistake here? He should have played knight e4, yeah? Is there a difference? I don't think there's a difference, to be honest. But let's see what happens if white can actually is allowed to play this. He's winning actually, yeah. Check, king h2, rook d2, rook a7. You have to close now this diagonal. And rook d7, hitting everything, yeah. This and this. So king c8. Check. Centralization, and this should be winning because king just comes like around here and wins the game. In the game, what happened is that knight is hanging and the bishop is protected by the knight, so it's lost. So Steinitz gives up the exchange, but it's completely lost position. And black resigns because he cannot keep this bishop alive, yeah? Take, and take. All right, that was pretty impressive. Very hard to play, actually, technical game. This endgame would be extremely hard to play even in modern chess by the top players, especially for black. But yeah, if somebody has a chance to trade rooks and activate the king, that probably will be instantly played actually in modern chess. So mistakes like that not gonna happen. But the middle game was very interesting. Stanislaus c5 and then the opponent c7 is a huge factor which causes him to lose the material in the first place. Yeah, we saw in the beginning of the game, in the middle game, that black had many opportunities to kick this knight out, and black actually gets a superior slightly chances because his pieces are better coordinated. Like if we go here, black could have actually played here a6, okay, and remove this threat to this bishop completely, and then black is actually a little bit better. So yeah, so that's one of the things in modern chess that I like always tell my students is that if your opponent's piece is crossing this kind of a boundary which separates his board half and your half board, yeah, you should look for the ways to get rid of that piece if you can, unless it makes a decisive weakness or something. I don't see how a6 here would make a decisive weakness. In fact, the whole Spanish game is built around this a6 move. In my mind, probably Steinitz just really loved his pawn structure like this, and he wanted to keep it uninterrupted and put the knight on d6. But the problem is this knight on b5 is just too annoying. All right, so that was the third game. Let me quickly end the stream and come back in a few seconds.